December 17th, 1944. 0530 hours. Honsfeld, Belgium. The Tiger tank's engine coughed, sputtered, then died. SS Obersturmbannführer Joachim Peiper slammed his fist against the turret hatch, the metallic clang echoing through the pre-dawn darkness. His driver, Unterscharführer Weber, attempted to restart the 700-horsepower Maybach engine. Nothing. The fuel gauge read empty. Herr Obersturmbannführer, Weber called up from his compartment, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. The reserve tank is also dry. Peiper climbed down from his command tank, his boots crunching on the frozen Belgian soil. Around him, the most powerful armoured spearhead the Wehrmacht had assembled for Operation Watch on the Rhine, the Ardennes offensive, sat motionless. 67 tanks, 149 half-tracks, and nearly 5,000 of Germany's most elite Waffen-SS soldiers, all paralysed by empty fuel tanks. Through the morning mist, Peiper could see the abandoned American position ahead, Honsfeld, a critical supply depot for the US 99th Infantry Division. The Americans had fled so quickly they'd left fires still burning in oil drums, coffee still hot in metal cups. And there, lined up like a gift from the god of war himself, stood rows upon rows of jerry cans. Thousands of them. The distinctive olive-drab American fuel containers. Peiper approached slowly, almost reverently. His adjutant, Hauptsturmführer Hans Gruller, pried open one can and sniffed. Benzin, Herr Obersturmbannführer, high-octane gasoline. As his men began the frantic work of refueling their vehicles, Peiper walked among the stockpile, counting. The mathematics were staggering. 50,000 gallons, enough to fuel his entire Kampfgruppe for the push to the Meuse River. Enough to potentially change the course of the offensive. The Americans had abandoned more fuel in this single depot than most German divisions had received in the past 6 months. But as Peiper stood among this bounty, watching his men pour American fuel into German tanks, a crushing realization settled over him like the morning fog. If the Americans could afford to abandon such quantities, if they could leave behind what Germany would guard with entire divisions, then this war was already over. Germany hadn't just miscalculated. Germany had fundamentally misunderstood the nature of its enemy. 6 months before Peiper's discovery at Honsfeld in June 1944, Albert Speer, Hitler's Minister of Armaments and War Production, had presented the Führer with a report that should have ended all offensive operations immediately. Germany's synthetic fuel production, the lifeblood of the Wehrmacht, had been systematically destroyed by Allied bombing. The Leuna works, which had produced 175,000 tons of fuel in April, managed only 5,000 tons by September. The Bergius hydrogenation plants at Pölitz, Blechhammer and Brooks were operating at less than 10% capacity. The numbers told a story of inevitable defeat. In 1944, the United States produced 1.8 billion barrels of crude oil. Germany, including all synthetic production and captured Romanian fields, managed 33 million barrels, less than 2% of American production. The Third Reich was attempting to wage mechanized warfare with horse-drawn logistics, while America was drowning its armies in petroleum abundance. Major Friedrich Zimmermann of the Wehrmacht's Logistics Command had calculated that the Ardennes offensive would require 4.5 million gallons of fuel to reach Antwerp. Hitler allocated 5 million gallons, but only half was actually delivered due to transportation problems. The German High Command was betting the entire offensive on capturing enemy supplies, a strategy that revealed terminal weakness rather than strength. The Americans, meanwhile, had constructed a petroleum pipeline system across France called PLUTO, Pipeline Under the Ocean, and the Red Ball Express, a massive truck convoy system that delivered 12,500 tons of supplies daily to the front lines. By December 1944, American forces in Europe were consuming 1.2 million gallons of fuel per day and receiving 1.4 million gallons. They were accumulating reserves while fighting. Joachim Peiper was not a fool. At 29, he was one of the youngest regimental commanders in the Waffen-SS, holder of the Knight's Cross with oak leaves and swords, veteran of the Eastern Front, where he had learned that in modern warfare, fuel was more precious than ammunition. His Kampfgruppe had been designated the Schwerpunkt, the decisive point, of the entire Ardennes offensive. On December 14th, 2 days before the offensive, Peiper attended the final briefing at Tondorf. General Sepp Dietrich, commanding the 6th SS Panzer Army, was blunt. "You will have enough fuel to reach the Meuse if you capture American supplies." The fuel allocation for Kampfgruppe Peiper was 31,000 gallons, enough for 50 miles of combat operations. The distance to the Meuse was 65 miles. The mathematics of failure were built into the plan from the beginning. As his column prepared to advance on December 16th, Peiper issued strict orders. Tanks would operate in single file to conserve fuel, engines would be shut off during any halt longer than 5 minutes, and the capture of American fuel dumps was priority one, above even tactical objectives. The contrast with American operations could not have been starker. That same morning, Captain James Rose of the US 743rd Tank Battalion, stationed just 20 miles from Peiper's starting position, recorded in his unit diary, "Received fuel resupply, 8,000 gallons. Third delivery this week. Storage tanks already at capacity." December 16th, 1944, 05:30 hours. The German artillery barrage that opened Operation Watch on the Rhine used more ammunition in 2 hours than the Wehrmacht had allocated for entire operations earlier in the war. But even this impressive display masked critical shortages. Peiper's column began moving at 7 a.m., already behind schedule. The roads, which on German maps appeared as highways, were narrow country lanes, many unpaved. Within hours, traffic jams developed as vehicles designed for the Russian steppes struggled through the Ardennes forest. At Lanzerath, Peiper's first objective, they encountered unexpected resistance from a single American intelligence and reconnaissance platoon, 18 men who held up the most powerful German armoured column for nearly 10 hours. During the delay, Peiper's vehicles sat idling, burning precious fuel. When they finally broke through and reached Honsfeld at dawn on December 17th, Peiper's column had covered 20 miles and consumed 40% of their fuel. At this rate, they would run dry before reaching the halfway point to the Meuse. The American supply depot at Honsfeld was not even a primary facility. It was a forward supply point for the 99th Infantry Division, what the US Army classified as a Class 3B depot, a temporary fuel station. Yet what Peiper found there exceeded the monthly fuel allocation for an entire German panzer division. Hauptsturmführer Hans Gruhle later testified, "We found pyramids of jerry cans, each containing 5 gallons of gasoline. They were stacked 3 meters high, extending for perhaps 200 meters. The Americans had not even attempted to destroy them." The captured fuel was high-octane aviation gasoline mixed with motor fuel, 80 octane or higher. German vehicles, especially the temperamental Maybach engines in the Tiger tanks, were designed for 74 octane fuel. The American gasoline was actually too good, causing engine problems in several German vehicles. As Peiper's men refueled, they made more discoveries. Sergeant Wilhelm Hoffmann found shipping manifests in the depot office. He could read English, having worked in his father's import business before the war. The papers indicated this fuel had been shipped from Texas to New York, across the Atlantic to Liverpool, across the Channel to Normandy, and trucked 400 miles to Honsfeld. The journey of over 6,000 miles had taken less than 6 weeks. "I showed the papers to Obersturmbannführer Peiper," Hoffmann recalled in a 1976 interview. "He read them twice, then crumpled them up. He said nothing, but his face went pale. We both understood what this meant." Private Ernst Kahler found a stack of Stars and Stripes newspapers dated December 15th, just 2 days old. The headline celebrated the opening of a new fuel pipeline from Cherbourg to Verdun, capable of delivering 300,000 gallons per day. A single pipeline delivering more fuel daily than Kampfgruppe Peiper would use in the entire offensive. To comprehend the shock of Peiper's discovery, one must understand Germany's fuel situation by late 1944. Since May, Allied bombing had reduced synthetic fuel production by 90%. The Luftwaffe was grounding aircraft for lack of aviation fuel. Pilot training had been cut from 250 flight hours to 60 hours. The German Navy's surface fleet had effectively ceased operations. U-boats were fitted with snorkels to conserve diesel by running on batteries longer. On the home front, German civilians had not seen private automobile traffic since 1942. Gasoline was so precious that the Gestapo investigated black market theft of individual litres. Farmers were returning to horse-drawn ploughs. Meanwhile, the United States was producing 67% of the world's oil. The East Texas oil field alone produced more petroleum than all of German-occupied Europe. American refineries were operating at such capacity that Standard Oil was experimenting with new petroleum byproducts simply because they had excess crude. With the 50,000 gallons captured at Honsfeld, Peiper's column surged forward. They reached Büllingen by noon on December 17th, capturing additional supplies, rations, ammunition, and most importantly maps showing other American fuel depots in the area. But the maps revealed a disturbing truth. The Americans had fuel stockpiles everywhere. Every major crossroads had a depot. The US First Army alone had 3.5 million gallons in reserve. Peiper pushed on to Ligneville, where his forces would commit the Malmedy massacre, killing 84 American prisoners. Even this war crime was connected to fuel desperation. Peiper later claimed he could not spare gasoline to transport prisoners. By evening on December 17th, Peiper's spearhead reached Stavelot, site of a major American fuel depot containing over 2 million gallons. Here was enough fuel to guarantee reaching the Meuse. But as the first German vehicles approached, American engineers were already at work. Captain John Brewster of the 291st Engineer Combat Battalion had received warning of the German approach. His orders were simple: deny fuel to the enemy at all costs. The Stavelot depot contained 2,189,000 gallons of gasoline in jerry cans, stacked across 15 acres. At 16:30 on December 17th, as Peiper's advance guard approached, Captain Brewster gave the order. Engineers poured gasoline trails between the stacks. White phosphorus grenades were distributed. Technical Sergeant Paul Solis threw the first grenade. The explosion was immediate and tremendous, he recalled. A wall of fire shot up maybe 100 feet. Within minutes, the entire depot was an inferno. Peiper's lead tanks arrived to find a pillar of black smoke rising 1,000 feet into the sky. The fire would burn for 3 days, consuming enough fuel to have powered Peiper's entire division to Antwerp and back. Unterscharführer Weber described the scene. The Obersturmbannführer stood on his tank turret, watching the flames. He said nothing for perhaps 5 minutes. Then he climbed down and told me, "They can afford to burn 2 million gallons to deny them to us." What are we doing here? Across the Ardennes, American engineers were destroying fuel dumps rather than risk capture. At Trois Ponts, 1.1 million gallons burned. At Spa, 2.5 million gallons were destroyed. In total, Americans deliberately destroyed over 8 million gallons during the first week, more than Germany had allocated for the entire operation. The ability to casually destroy millions of gallons was rooted in a supply system beyond German comprehension. The Red Ball Express had delivered 412,000 tons of supplies using 6,000 trucks operating round the clock. Each truck consumed 40 gallons daily. The operation itself burned more fuel than German Army Group B received monthly. By December 1944, the Motor Transport Service employed 230 truck companies operating on colour-coded routes. The system delivered 20,000 tons of supplies daily, including 3,000 tons of fuel. Colonel James Snyder, Chief Logistics Officer for First Army, recorded on December 18th. Fuel receipts yesterday, 1,847,000 gallons. Fuel issued, 1,623,000 gallons. Net gain to reserves, 224,000 gallons. The pipeline system was even more impressive. Operation Pluto had laid pipes across the English Channel, pumping 1 million gallons daily from Britain. A network of pipelines extended inland. The Cherbourg-Paris line delivered 800,000 gallons daily. The Seine-Verdun line moved 650,000 gallons daily. By December 1944, Allied forces in northwest Europe were consuming 7.5 million gallons daily, while receiving 8.2 million gallons. They were building reserves during offensive operations. As Peiper pushed deeper into Belgium on December 18th, the impossibility of the German position became clear. At Cheneux, they captured another depot, 5,000 gallons consumed in 3 hours of combat. Tiger tanks consumed 2.5 gallons per mile in battle. Panthers burned 1.5 gallons per mile. In the difficult Ardennes terrain, consumption increased by 40%. Hauptmann Otto Dingler, maintenance officer for the 1st SS Panzer Regiment, recorded, "By noon on December 18th, we had consumed 67,000 gallons since the offensive began. We had captured perhaps 55,000 gallons. We were operating at a deficit. The Americans, monitoring German radio traffic through ultra-intercepts, knew Peiper's fuel situation. General Courtney Hodges ordered all units. Enemy critically short of fuel. Destroy all gasoline stocks threatened by capture." That same day, American C-47s flew 316 sorties delivering supplies to Bastogne, including 160,000 gallons of fuel. Americans were flying more fuel to a surrounded garrison than Peiper's entire Kampfgruppe possessed. By December 19th, as Peiper's forces engaged defenders at Stoumont, the fuel crisis had become critical. Tanks were being abandoned with empty fuel tanks rather than from battle damage. Peiper consolidated his remaining fuel, perhaps 8,000 gallons, enough for one engagement or retreat, but not both. Meanwhile, Allied planners were preparing for January operations. Brigadier General Maurice Gilland requested 245 million gallons for the coming month. The request was approved without discussion. The contrast extended beyond quantity. American vehicles were standardized for efficiency. Sherman tanks consumed 0.8 gallons per mile versus the Tiger's 2.5. American trucks got 8 miles per gallon fully loaded. Parts were interchangeable, maintenance simplified. German forces operated a bewildering array of captured and manufactured vehicles with different requirements. French tanks needed different oil than German Panthers. Soviet trucks required different parts than German Opels. Each complication multiplied logistical difficulties. On December 20th, Peiper received a radio message. Fuel convoy destroyed by Allied aircraft. No resupply possible. Continue with available resources. Peiper called his commanders together. Sturmbannführer Werner Pötschke was blunt. "We have fuel for perhaps 20 kilometers. The Meuse is 30 kilometers away." According to Hauptsturmführer Grüller's testimony, the Obersturmbannführer said, "Gentlemen, we have discovered we are fighting an enemy who burns more fuel to deny it to us than we received for this entire operation. What we captured at Honsfeld, which seemed miraculous, was nothing to them. We cannot win." This realization was spreading. General Hasso von Manteuffel, commanding 5th Panzer Army, later wrote, "When I learned Americans had destroyed 8 million gallons rather than risk our capturing it, I knew the offensive had failed before it began." Colonel Friedrich von der Heydte, captured December 23rd, told interrogators, "Your soldiers throw away chocolate. My men haven't seen chocolate in 2 years. You burn millions of gallons. We measure by the litre. How can we fight such abundance?" By December 21st, Peiper was surrounded at La Glaise, his tanks immobile. American forces surrounding him, 31st Infantry Division, 82nd Airborne, 3rd Armoured, had a combined fuel allocation of 340,000 gallons for December 21st alone. Peiper had perhaps 1,000 gallons. Private First Class Richard McKinney wrote home, "We've got Germans surrounded who ran out of gas. Our captain jokes we use more fuel heating coffee than they have for tanks." The American response demonstrated industrial warfare at its peak. Patton's Third Army pivot north required 350,000 gallons just for redeployment, considered impossible by German standards, yet accomplished in 3 days. December 23rd brought clear weather. Allied aircraft flew 2,000 sorties, each burning fuel at rates that would have grounded the Luftwaffe for weeks. P-47s consumed 300 gallons per hour. B-26s burned 200 gallons hourly. One day's air operations consumed more than Germany's entire offensive allocation. On the night of December 23rd to 24th, Peiper abandoned his vehicles and escaped on foot. Of 119 tanks and assault guns that began the offensive, 39 remained operational but immobilized. These were destroyed with remaining ammunition. Obergefreiter Heinz Goltz described the scene. "We drained the last fuel from all vehicles, maybe 200 gallons total. The Obersturmbannführer personally destroyed his command tank, millions of Reichsmarks of equipment destroyed by empty fuel tanks. Of 5,000 men who began with Kampfgruppe Peiper, approximately 770 returned. They had advanced 60 miles, captured several depots, and discovered the truth about Allied logistics. News of Peiper's discoveries spread rapidly through German command. On December 26th, Field Marshal Walter Model received reports on captured American supplies. His chief of staff recorded Model's reaction. The Field Marshal read the quantities twice: 50,000 gallons at Honsfeld, 2 million burned at Stavelot, 8 million destroyed rather than captured. He said, "We are not fighting the same war." Hitler, informed December 28th, refused to accept reality. Speer wrote, "Hitler insisted the numbers were propaganda. When shown photographs of burning Stavelot, he claimed it was Hollywood effects. But lower ranks understood." Gefreiter Wilhelm Hoffmann wrote his wife, "Americans destroy more fuel daily than we receive monthly. They drive tanks like we march. This war is lost." The fuel crisis was symptomatic of a larger truth. By 1944, America produced 50% of world manufacturing. A new aircraft every 5 minutes, a ship daily, a tank every 7 minutes. Petroleum production statistics were overwhelming. United States, 1.8 billion barrels. Soviet Union, 110 million barrels. Germany, including synthetic, 33 million barrels. Japan, 2.6 million barrels. The Axis combined produced less than 2% of American petroleum. Every major German offensive after 1942 had been constrained by fuel. Every American offensive was supported by abundance German planners couldn't conceive. Lieutenant Colonel Chester Hansen recorded a revealing incident December 27th. A logistics officer reported weather had reduced fuel deliveries to only 500,000 gallons daily. There was concern until someone noted this exceeded Germany's total offensive allocation. German POWs from the Ardennes were more shocked by American waste than firepower. Seeing GIs discard half-eaten rations or use gasoline for heating shattered morale more than artillery. Oberst Günther Reichhelm told interrogators, "We knew your production numbers abstractly, but seeing soldiers waste more than we possessed made them real. Every German who saw your casual abundance knew the war was hopeless." This knowledge spread through letters despite censorship. Feldwebel Ernst Müller wrote, "Americans wash clothes in gasoline. They feed chocolate to dogs. They fire artillery for Christmas. We cannot fight infinity." The psychological impact undermined German racial superiority narratives. How could decadent Americans possess such wealth while the master race scraped for necessities? During Nuremberg trials, German leaders consistently cited logistics, particularly fuel, as decisive. Field Marshal Keitel testified, "We had operational superiority 1940 to 41. By 1944, we couldn't move forces for lack of fuel while Americans moved armies like chess pieces." Peiper, tried for the Malmedy massacre, offered revealing testimony. "Every decision after December 17th was influenced by fuel shortage. We couldn't maneuver, pursue, or retreat effectively. Americans moved freely while we counted litres." General Heinz Guderian wrote, "When Peiper captured 50,000 gallons, meaning everything to him but nothing to Americans, the war was over." The story resonates because it represents when industrial warfare reached its conclusion. Wars were won by production statistics, not warrior courage. The romantic notion of warfare died in the Ardennes among empty fuel tanks. Dr. Richard Overy calculated that by 1944, Allied to Axis production ratios exceeded 5-1 in major categories. In petroleum, it approached 50-1. These advantages couldn't be overcome by superior training or tactics. America produced 324,750 aircraft during the war. Germany 119,907. Americans built 88,410 tanks. Germany 46,857. But most tellingly, America refined 1.8 billion barrels of oil in 1944 alone, while Germany scraped together 33 million barrels. December 24th, 1944. As Peiper's men slipped through American lines on foot, abandoning 39 tanks, 70 half-tracks, and 177 other vehicles, the magnitude crystallized. They had captured 50,000 gallons, seemingly miraculous, only to learn it was meaningless to an enemy who could burn millions. Unterscharführer Weber reflected in 1975. "That morning at Honsfeld, finding American fuel, we celebrated like winning the lottery. By evening, learning about Stavelot burning, we understood we'd already lost. Americans had so much they could destroy what we'd die to possess." The 50,000 gallons was less than a single American armoured division consumed in 2 days. Less than the Red Ball Express burned in 3 hours. A rounding error in Allied daily consumption. Major General J. Lawton Collins later wrote, "Germans' desperate attempts to capture fuel revealed their miscalculation. They assumed we valued fuel as they did, as irreplaceable. They couldn't comprehend we had so much we could burn millions rather than risk tactical disadvantage." Operation Watch on the Rhine failed through immutable mathematics of industrial warfare. The offensive consumed approximately 2.8 million gallons, 40% over allocation, the difference from captured supplies. During the same period, Americans consumed 267 million gallons, nearly 100 times more. The Wehrmacht lost 100,000 men, 800 tanks, 1,000 aircraft. But most devastating was loss of illusions. Every German witnessing American abundance understood Germany wasn't fighting a war but participating in its own execution. Joachim Peiper survived, imprisoned until 1956 for war crimes. On July 14, 1976, he was murdered at his French home by unknown assailants. But in 1967, he told historian Henry Lehmann, "Finding that depot was the worst thing. If we'd run out earlier, we might have retreated with dignity. Instead, we discovered Americans had oceans while we had drops. We discovered impossibility." The lesson extends beyond World War II. In industrial warfare, logistics supersedes tactics, production overwhelms courage, abundance defeats dedication. The German soldier of 1944 was arguably better trained and more experienced. It didn't matter. Americans were backed by an industrial machine that could waste more than Germany could produce. This truth was encoded in every jerrycan at Honsfeld, every gallon burned at Stavelot, every pipeline across France. Wars between industrial powers would be won by factories and refineries, not brilliant generals. Colonel Trevor Dupuy calculated that in December 1944, each American soldier was supported by 67 pounds of supplies daily. Each German received 3 pounds. Americans complained about waste. Germans would have considered American waste unimaginable abundance. In 1984, 40 years after the battle, veterans gathered at La Glaise. The museum displays Peiper's Tiger tank, still positioned where it ran out of fuel December 23, 1944. Former Unteroffizier Karl Wortmann stood beside the tank with former Staff Sergeant Roy Anderson of the 30th Infantry Division. "We always wondered why you stopped," Anderson said. "We thought it was tactical." Wortmann laughed bitterly. "We stopped because tanks were empty. You burned millions to keep it from us. How could we fight that?" Anderson was quiet, then said, "We never knew you were that short. We had so much we never thought about it." That exchange captured December 1944's truth. One side measured by the gallon, the other by millions. One fought for each jerry can, the other burned oceans. The outcome was predetermined. German records provide damning evidence. Army Group B's War Diary, December 1944. December 16th. Offensive begins. Fuel 70% of minimum. December 17th. Peiper captures 50,000 gallons. December 18th. Multiple depots destroyed. 5+ million gallons lost. December 19th. Fuel critical. Units immobilized. December 24th. Peiper abandons vehicles. Fuel exhaustion. Meanwhile, First Army reports, December 16th. Reserves, 3.7 million gallons. December 17th, 2.2 million destroyed. December 18th, 1.8 million received. December 24th. Reserves, 4.1 million. Americans treated millions with indifference. Germans reserved for individual cans. Beyond quantity, American fuel represented technological superiority. American refineries perfected catalytic cracking, producing higher octanes more efficiently than German hydrogenation. American 100-octane aviation fuel gave aircraft performance advantages over German planes running 87-octane synthetic. Americans perfected additives Germany couldn't replicate: tetraethyl lead, ethylene dibromide, detergents. German engines, designed for lower quality, often ran poorly on captured American gasoline. Fuel shortage shaped every soldier's experience. Gefreiter Hans Müller recorded, December 20th, marched 30 kilometers, no fuel for trucks, past abandoned American vehicles with engines running for warmth. They leave engines running. We march through snow. Medical services were crippled. Ambulances couldn't evacuate wounded. Hospitals couldn't run generators. Men died waiting for transportation that never came. Oberarzt Dr. Wilhelm Kersting testified, "We had excellent surgeons, supplies captured from Americans, but no fuel for ambulances. Men died who could have been saved with 10 kilometers transport." The discoveries shattered German propaganda about American weakness. Soldiers had been told Americans were soft, incapable. Then they discovered Americans could destroy more than Germany possessed. Goebbels's diary, December 28th. Reports indicate serious morale problems. Soldiers write about American superiority, undermining our narrative. But stories spread faster than censorship. The myth of German superiority couldn't survive contact with American logistics. The Ardennes failure meant Germany had no options except desperate defense. General Jodl testified at Nuremberg. After the Ardennes, we knew it was lost. We'd played our last card and discovered the enemy held all aces. Recognizing German desperation, Allies focused on destroying fuel production. By February 1945, German fuel production ceased. The Luftwaffe was grounded, training cancelled. The Wehrmacht became static, destroyed piecemeal by mobile enemies. Spring 1945 brought surreal scenes. German units surrendered from immobility, not defeat. Entire panzer divisions sat helplessly as Allies drove past. General Major Fritz Bayerlein described, "We had 42 operational tanks, experienced crews, ammunition. We had 300 litres fuel, not enough for the next town. We destroyed our tanks and walked to captivity." Meanwhile, American advance was constrained only by traffic jams from vehicle abundance. Third Army alone had 15,000 vehicles. Kampfgruppe Peiper's fuel crisis demonstrates how industrial capacity determined World War II's outcome. When Peiper stood among captured jerry cans that December morning, he glimpsed truth. They fought an enemy whose waste exceeded their need. The numbers tell everything. German offensive allocation, 5 million gallons. Fuel destroyed by Americans, 8 million gallons. Daily American consumption, 7.5 million gallons. Peiper's capture at Honsfeld, 50,000 gallons. Percentage of American daily supply, 0.6%. The Battle of the Bulge killed 19,000 Americans, perhaps 100,000 Germans. It destroyed Wehrmacht's last reserves. But its lasting impact was spreading knowledge through German ranks. America possessed incomprehensible abundance. Peiper's discovery wasn't just about fuel, but industrial warfare's nature. Victory belonged to whoever produced the most petroleum, steel, aluminum. Germany never had a chance. The final irony: American forces cataloguing abandoned German equipment at La Glaise found 39 perfect tanks, abandoned solely for lack of fuel. Major Robert Harrison's salvage report noted, "Fuel required, 8,000 gallons. Classification, minimal. Source, local reserve. Time, 4 hours." What was impossible for Germans, 8,000 gallons to save their best tanks, was beneath American notice. A minor request using local reserves exceeding Kampfgruppe Peiper's peak strength. This was Peiper's discovery at Honsfeld. Not just that America had more fuel, but that American abundance operated on a scale making German scarcity irrelevant. The war was over when American industrial capacity mobilized. Honsfeld revealed what had been true since 1942. Germany fought the impossible, measuring defeat in gallons while America measured victory in oceans. The Tiger tank sits in La Glaise's museum, fuel gauge empty, monument to when tactical excellence met logistical reality and lost. Visitors ask why such powerful tanks were abandoned. The answer, no fuel. In industrial warfare, that was the only answer that mattered.